Hey, this is Todd. This is going to be somewhat of a ramble. I know they're all rambles. I ramble. I am a rambler. But this one in particular is a bit of a ramble because I think it's interesting. I don't have a particular, hey, this is what it's all about. This is something that I think you should do, though maybe there is something I think you should do. I'm not sure. It kind of came out of the blue, but it sort of excited me. It got my brain firing on whatever cylinders in my brain have survived thus far to be fired. So I thought, well, let me, as my grandmother would say, strike while the iron is hot and talk about it. So here I am. First things first, this all arose because I was reading the First Fantasy campaign, which was put out by Judges Guild, and it was written by Dave Arneson, and it had to do with details and just all kinds of stuff about his game that D&D and everything else kind of arose out of that in collaboration with the stuff that Gygax was doing. I think the Alexandrian, I might be wrong, but I think it's there, did a really good write-up of him basically going through all these different rules and trying to make sense of it. There's a lot of stuff that is not really sensical. It's hard to make sense of a lot of it. There's a lot of stuff that seems to be missing. We're getting kind of a hodgepodge of notes, recollections, and other kind of material all sort of thrown together in this book. But it is an really interesting book. So I was looking through it, and actually I didn't really get that far before this Thunderbolt hit. I was, let's see, I think I was on page 3, which is actually the first page of text. And I was breezing through his introduction, and I got to this bit. Character motivation was solved by stating that you did not get experience points until the money had been spent on your area of interest. So I read that, and I just went, whoa. Like, what is he talking about here? And it just kind of, sort of, one of those kind of, mind-blowing might be too strong a word, but it's just something that really just resonated with me. I was like, that was great, because I've often talked about, if not in videos, you can find certainly in interactions I've had online with, particularly if you're playing ye old OSR sandbox type games, that you have to have players whose characters are self-actualizing. They have goals, and they can put those goals into motion, because the things with the sandbox is you're not forcing them down one particular narrative pathway. So they really have to be comfortable forging ahead. And now I don't know if he had this issue with his players. Obviously, a lot of this stuff they were kind of making up as they go along at this stage of the RPG game. I mean, this is fantasy RPGs in their infancy, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of stuff to follow other than, we got to make it up. But talking about having areas of interest for characters and making experience points, not just loot that you're bringing back, but spending it. And I've seen systems, OSR systems, where they've talked about spending loot to earn the money. I know a lot of GMs have played with those rules, and it's been in several different rule sets. I don't remember ones off the top of my head, but it's not really an uncommon trope. In the Conan Swords and Sorcery style game, there was often this concept of, you're starting every adventure kind of poor, then that means you've spent all your money on frivolous things, and that became a way that was indoctrinated in some systems of, hey, if you want experience for that gold, you have to just spend it on partying and doing all this stuff. The stuff that you see in the movie, in those scenes where Conan and Valerian and company, they're just kind of living it up, just getting wasted, having a great time, right? Just blowing all their money as quickly as they can earn it, as opposed to, holding on to it and saving it. But this is something slightly different, because this isn't about spending it on lifestyle type stuff. It's about spending it on actualizing your goals, which means that you have to have, what is the term he uses again? You have to have an area of interest, because I, as the referee, and you as the player have to agree on, hey, if I spend this 1,000 gold pieces on this particular pursuit, that's one that will earn me experience. Well, then we have to have an understanding of, okay, well, what is your goal? What is this area of interest that we can decide that this pursuit matches up to that interest or not? So what does that mean? And it again got my wheels turning. I started thinking of, well, often I've talked about in various places, I'm not a huge backstory guy. I mean, they're great. They're fine. And I'm not trying to say that people who write extensive backstories are bad. It's wonderful, but it's just not usually what I like to do as a player or that I really appreciate as a GM. But this got me thinking of, what if you had, what we call it forward stories, which is someone saying, hey, I'm interested in this thing. This is something I want to pursue, this goal that I have. And instead of me spending a lot of time talking about where I've come from, I'm going to spend time deciding where I'm going. Where do I see my character? If he's lucky enough to get to level 10 or level whatever, what do I see them being? And not only that, because we're tying experience points to stuff I spend to get to that end point, I need to have intermediate goals. So let me look at an example. Let me throw one out there, right? So this one is very much the trope. I'm a fighter and I want to end up with being a lord with a castle and some kind of domain. Great. And, depending on what rules you're using, they'll have at certain levels, certain options will become open to you. And obviously you have to have money to do that. But what might the steps be to getting to that endpoint look like when you're just level 1? Obviously, you're not going to be having a whole bunch of money to spend on, I don't know, stones on the stones you might use for the castle walls. There's no reason to employ stonemasons if you don't have plans yet. You're not going to have land yet, but you could think about, well, what might the baby steps look like? And as a player, I write those down. I work with the referee, I work with the GM on saying, okay, well, what do those little steps look like? And this to me does a whole bunch of stuff. One, it's a great world building thing. It forces me as a GM, as a ref, to look at the player and say, okay, you want to become a lord, you want to become one of the ruling elites. I might not have considered, well, how would someone who's maybe a commoner by birth get into that mix? And then what might that commoner actually know about? What stories might be out there? They may not know all the technical stuff. In fact, they probably wouldn't, but they might know the legendary tales of Roland or someone similar in my world that rose up from a commoner to being in the army to, winning renown in battles, in which case they then become knighted or whatever happens. Or I think Excalibur in the movie, Percival, he just follows Lancelot until Lancelot finally says, okay, I'll take you on as a squire because you've just shown such moxie. And then eventually he rises up and becomes a very important knight, right? So these stories are out there. I just thought of a couple, just riffing off the stuff in our world lore, but I got to come up with that now in my fantasy world. Okay, what does that look like? What does this might do? And then, well, what kind of things are those? If we say, okay, there's a Percival type tale, and I don't know if that's really Percival in the actual legends. I'm just thinking from the movie Excalibur. So don't at me if I'm off on Percival. It's been forever since I've looked that stuff up. I'm going off the top of my head here. Give me a break. Well, then if you want to follow that Percival path, you might need to find a knight. And maybe I say in my world, okay, any kind of level 4 fighter type will be a knight. So you got to figure out where these guys are and then figure out how to impress one of them to take on a job. Great. So you might say with some of this, well, how does this always translate back to gold? And the answer is it might not. Percival doesn't impress Lancelot by giving him a bunch of gold, or even something that is valued in gold pieces. He didn't give him a gem. He didn't give him a work of art, or give him a magic sword, or just hand a bunch of gold to him. If you recall in the movie, he was just very dogged in his pursuit and his following of Lancelot, and he ended up doing stuff like Lancelot goes to sleep and he wakes up and there's a rabbit is cooking already waiting for him. And even though Lancelot is on his horse, Percival is basically walking and running, but he says, hey, it's fine with me. I'll run all day and all night to follow you, and follows him all the way to the gates of Camelot. That's not a gold thing. That's not well, here, I got this from the dungeon, I'm going to hand it off to you kind of thing. It's more of a role-playing thing. It's more of a character thing. It's more of having sort of an idea in your brain, which then leads me to, we can think about ways in which we can, in a sense, talk about milestones, but in a way that I feel like are very different than the milestones in 5th edition that most people deal with, because these aren't milestones that are created by me saying, hey, when you get far enough in the story, you're going to get a level. It's me maybe putting a gold piece or experience point value on certain actions that the player is deciding. The player who, if we're going to put this in a game world, the player who's playing a Percival comes to me and says, listen, I want to be a knight. What are the kind of steps? I say, okay, well, the steps are you find a knight, you impress them in some way, and you figure out from there how to get there. And the player says, okay, well, maybe how tough is it to find a knight? What is the experience points, the gold value? And I might say, looking at where they are and where they are in the world and the kind of stuff, well, maybe there's somewhere where there are knights walking around. Maybe they're already playing in Camelot, essentially, or in the town surrounding Camelot. So it's no big deal to find a knight. I say, well, you could find one easily. Getting their attention, that might be worth a level or half a level. It doesn't have to be, in classic milestones. It's like, oh, you go up a level. I might say you got to do 3 of these steps. Give me these steps you want. I say, okay, it's easy to find knights, but getting their attention is going to be difficult, and getting it in kind of a positive way is going to be difficult. And then proving yourself that you're someone worthy. These are difficult things. And then the player might come up with these steps. Okay, well, I'm gonna pick out a knight. I'm gonna get their attention. I'm gonna do this or that. And I say, okay, if you could get squired, that's worth a level. You figure out how to find a knight and increase them squire you, that's 1 level. Or I could even just say that has a certain gold piece value, because they might be mixing and matching, right? They might be adventuring, then they might be trying to pursue this. It might be something they're doing on downtime. So I might say, okay, well, this is a 2,000 gold piece. This is worth 2,000 GP in experience if you can do some of these steps. Great. And I think as a player, for me, it's much different than the milestones that you see in 5th edition, because in those, they can be very opaque. They're often GM fiated. Oh, when you reach a certain plot point, you reach something else, I'm going to give it to you. But the players don't know what the plot point is. It's all up to when it feels right to the GM, you will gain a level. I dislike that intensely, because I, as a player, have no control over that, and it just makes me guess, what does the GM want me to do? And then I try to do that. But this is all about taking stuff that the players want to do and translating that into experience points values or gold piece values, however you want to do the math, essentially creating milestones that, again, they don't, the other part is they don't have to work separately than your experience points. They can work in the same thing. They can be mixed and matched, however, but the stuff that's pushing characters towards their goals, giving them that sense of accomplishment, that sense of moving forward. And it doesn't just have to start when you reach a name level. I feel like a lot of times in the classic rules, you reach name level and then suddenly, things open up, and suddenly now you have this option to get followers or to do this or that. And I know a lot of folks have talked about, as far as OSR games, is really taking that advancement and pushing it out. Why do you need to start? You can only start at level, 7 or 8 to build a stronghold. You should be starting that earlier on. You should have the ability to. If you have the means and you have the whatever, you should be able to start that whenever you want. And this is a way for doing that. It's still player-led. It's still really up to them. I'm still saying, hey, you have a goal. Whatever that goal may be, you want to become head of the Thieves Guild, then there's a whole set of goals. And you say, okay, well, the head of the Thieves Guild, that's not really a realistic goal until you're in that 8, 9, 10 level range. But there's a lot of steps you got to go through to get there. And there's a lot of different angles you can take. As the player, or as the GM, I will work with you as the player to figure out what those goals should be. And then we can take those steps and start to put values on them. Okay, if you can get this first step where you get inducted into a Thieves Guild, that's worth a level's worth of GP, whatever it is, 2,000 gold piece value, if you can do that. It also brings to mind something else that I kind of liked. I liked it always in theory more than I think in the way it was actually done, which is concepts of prestige classes, which is the way it just, when I hear the words in my brain, I always loved it because it gave me this great flavor of class levels you get by accomplishing things in the fiction as opposed to just paying a gold piece or experience point cost. So to go back to the Percival example, becoming a knight isn't just about, hey, you reached 4th level and you have this much experience, whatever, so now you're a knight. It's that, okay, you need to find a lord to knight you. And then once you do that, assuming you meet the XP requirements, then you can become a knight. Before that, you're just a level fighter, and then maybe being a knight gives you a couple of extra things you didn't have before. It doesn't even have to be stuff like you get an extra attack now, or you get more bonus damage or something like, no, it could just be stuff that exists outside of that. Well, as a knight, you are now accorded certain things in society. Now you have an income. Now potentially you are given some tract of land to manage. You're given all kinds of stuff. Doesn't have to just be stuff that's like, well, I'm going to get another class power. It's it can be more social, more stuff that's in the role-playing realm than mechanics, right? They do have, obviously there's the potentially mechanical effects of it if now you have income, if now you have whatever, but it's not like just giving you an extra +1. I really like that. And this is another way to play with that, because now I can talk about, listen, you can level up as a thief all you want. Just pay the experience cost and find trainers, and yeah, you'll level up. But if you go down the Thieves Guild, for every, say you get that, okay, now you're a Thieves Guild member, that accords you some things. Now you get, when you go to people and you want to do the thieves can, other thieves, they'll now talk to you. Whereas before you didn't know the guild, handshake that would allow you to communicate, or that they would talk to. Now they know. Now maybe you get some contacts. Now if you get arrested, there are a couple of those guards that are on the payroll that might help you slip away, right? Now you have these extra things that you only got because you fulfilled this goal, and it's a goal that you set, right? It's a player set goal. It's there for you. And that leads you again towards this path of helping you actualize these goals. And as a GM, it gives me reasons to really sit with the players doing that old session 0 thing and really trying to give them goals and show them how it's not just an end level game. It's not something that you have to think about pie in the sky. Oh, if I live to be 10th level, I'll get this. Well, you'll be 10th level before you probably get that, but you can start laying the groundwork now and work towards stuff. And that way, no matter where you are in different narratives that are coming up in the sandbox, the player can always look at their sheet or whatever, their log, their diary, and say, well, we didn't stop the hags from doing this thing, or we did kill the dragon, and but now I don't know quite where to go. I know I have these goals. I know I have these things to do. I know I have, as he said, an area of interest that I need to attend to that is not only tied to, I set them up myself, so I assume that there's some meta enjoyment that me as a player will get out of actualizing them, but they're actually tied to my advancement. So I am making a point of saying this is my character's advancement towards success, and it's mechanically tied in, right? It's not just what I think as a player he wants to do, but then it's also tied into, hey, he's not going to gain levels unless I'm moving towards my goal. So it really does seem to work together. That's it. That's all I got. I thought it was really interesting. Hopefully it will fire some folks out there, some of your ideas as a player or as a GM, as much as it did for me. As always, if you like these videos, please give it a thumbs up. Think about subscribing to the channel. I appreciate it a lot. But regardless of whenever, however you're watching or listening to this, have a great day. I will talk to you later, and game on.